In today's lecture, we'll deal with Philip Sidney as a critic. So, Philip Sidney was born in the year 1554. He was a man of exceptional abilities. For his contemporaries, he was a model gentleman, a courtier, and a soldier. He was a man of letters too. His creativity is seen in his poems like Astrophel and Stella, Arcadia, and his sonnets, which are modeled after Petrarch. As a critic, he wrote a tract called Defense of Poesy, which is also known as an apology for poetry. All his writings were published posthumously, that is, after his death. Sidney died in a battlefield in the year 1586. Now, Philip Sidney is an important critic for us because with him, English criticism in its true spirit can be said to have started. Sidney can be regarded as the first English critic. His critical thought is based upon the classical philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. An apology for poetry or defense of poesy, which was posthumously published in 1595, remains the major work through which his contribution as a critic can be assessed. Now, when we talk about an apology for poetry, it is important for us to look at the background which necessitated its writing. The work came out because there was a severe attack on the art of poetry by a contemporary of Philip Sidney, Stephen Gosson. Stephen Gosson was not a very significant writer of the time. In fact, he was a lightweight as compared to Sidney in terms of his literary abilities and his overall standing as a man of letters. However, he wrote a tract titled School of Abuse, wherein Gosson censured the poets as liars and corrupters of mankind. Gosson wrote the tract on the lines of criticism that was leveled against poetry by the classical critic Plato. The School of Abuse was dedicated to Philip Sidney, who was a reputed poet of his time. So, what Gosson did there was an act of temerity where he dedicated a tract condemning the poets and dedicating it to one of the great poets of the time himself, Sir Philip Sidney. So a rebuttal to this was due, and Sir Philip Sidney did that. Now, when Sidney counters Stephen Gosson, he does not even for a while take the name of Stephen Gosson, but he answers all his charges indirectly. We'll go through the charges that Sidney rebuts. Gosson said that a man can spend his time in better pursuits than poetry. Sidney observes that poetry can teach and promote virtue, so it is a profitable indulgence. On the charge of poets being liars, Sidney defends by stating that poets are not after facts, they aim to reach the higher truth. Gosson said that poetry promotes wanton sinfulness and lustful love. To this, Sidney rebuts that the fault lies not with poetry but with the corrupt minds of the poets. So, according to him, if poetry is abused, the fault lies not with poetry but with the abuser. Gosson had invoked Plato for condemning poetry. Sidney says that Plato was condemning the abuse of poetry and not poetry itself, which he considers divinely inspired. So, in a way, Sidney does not agree with Stephen Gosson when he invokes Plato, and Sidney considers that Plato was in fact not against poetry in its true spirit. He was only against the abuse. Sidney was a classical critic. As I've said earlier, he depended a lot on his readings of Plato and Aristotle for his opinions on literature. According to Philip Sidney, poetry is an art of imitation with its end to teach and delight. Sidney borrows from Aristotle the concept of mimesis. As is known, mimesis refers to imitation. Aristotle believed that poets imitate the ideal world, and that is why they are superior creators. Sidney believes in the observance of the three unities of action, time, and place. Here, it is important for us to know that Aristotle himself did not propound the three unities. Aristotle talked only about the unity of action. He did not talk directly of the unity of time or unity of place. However, these two unities were interpreted to flow from the unity of action by the likes of interpreters like Castelvetro. And Sidney had read Aristotle through Castelvetro, the Italian philosopher, and that is why Sidney believes in Castelvetro's interpretation of Aristotle, and he propounds the three unities of action, time, and place. Sidney also condemns tragicomedies. Tragicomedies are the plays in which the tragic elements as well as the comic elements are combined. There, serious action as well as comic action take place side by side, and such plays were not in vogue during the ancient times, during the times when the Greek and Roman playwrights wrote their plays. So, such a development was unacceptable to Philip Sidney. He believed that such plays did not do justice to either tragedy or comedy. However, we must also note here that Sidney had died by 1586, and much of the greater plays in English literature had not been produced by then. Marlowe and Shakespeare had not yet appeared on the scene, and therefore the better models of such types of plays were not available with Sir Philip Sidney, and that is why he condemns the plays that were in existence in his time and they were of an inferior quality. Sidney also doesn't hold versification to be the sole criterion to judge a poem. Sidney regards that the poets as prophets who deliver a golden world of ideas. So we can see here that Philip Sidney does a lot to restore the reputation of the poets and poetry. He defends the art of poetry against the invectives which were loosely thrown at poetry. He does precious service to the art of literature by taking it to the heights which it deserved. Sir Philip Sidney can also be credited to bring the critical consciousness into English literature, which was hitherto lacking. So, here lies the importance of Sir Philip Sidney as a critic. This is all about our discussion today, and I once again request you to please subscribe to my channel and share it. Thank you.